Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this presentation is titled The Joy of Having as Your T-38 UPT, which stands for Undergraduate Pilot Training, Instructor, someone who never wanted to be a T-38 instructor. Now, this has to do with my Air Force pilot training and the T-38 instructor that I'm going to tell you about. Now, my 37 instructor was a great guy. That's me on the right there. That's him on the left, looking stern. He was a great guy. We got along fantastically. We had a good time. I did very well in the T-37s, and I was just having a fun time. Well, now we go on over to T-38s, and I had an instructor. We were one of his first few classes, and I'm going to call him Lieutenant Flail again. And Lieutenant Flail again had a big chip on his shoulder. He did not want to be a T-38 instructor. He wanted to be a fighter pilot. And he was ticked off that he was a 38 instructor, and he let everybody know that he was ticked off that he was a 38 instructor. And as my instructor, it wasn't very pleasant to work with him. Now, there were three of his students that were assigned to him. One of them was a guard bum. He already knew what aircraft he was going to. I'm going to call him Lieutenant Wall, and he knew what he was going to. And so all he had to do was complete training. All he had to do was pass. It didn't matter if he was number 1 or number 60 out of the class. There were 60 in our class. All he had to do was graduate. So he was pretty laid back, and he had kind of a I don't give a crap attitude. And actually, he and the instructor, because the instructor had an I don't give a crap attitude, they actually got along fairly well. And they joked about how they'd go out at the bar and go drinking. And the second student I'm going to tell you about, Lieutenant Norbeck, he said, well, you never invite us out for drinks. And Lieutenant Flail again looked at it and says, I choose my friends carefully. Well, that was a really nice thing, wasn't it? Well, so we had, like I said, Lieutenant Wall, Lieutenant Norbeck, and Lieutenant Norbeck was kind of an interesting guy. He just kind of breezed through life, happy-go-lucky, smile, just nothing really fazed him, and he was having a good time. And then there was me. I wanted to do well. I wanted to do very well. I wanted to get a fighter too. Well, of course, my instructor didn't get a fighter, so who the heck did I think I was wanting to get a fighter? All right, well, we're doing the T-38, and Lieutenant Norbeck was kind of an interesting guy. When you put the T-38 on the runway, you line it up, you bring the power up to 100%. That's called military power. You check the engine instruments to make sure everything is where it's supposed to be. You release the brakes, and then you push forward into full afterburner, which is really cool because it gives you a 40% thrust increase. And you watch the nozzles swing, and they have to swing into a certain range. They have to open up for the afterburner when it lights. And away you go. It's a lot of fun. Well, the first takeoff, Lieutenant Norbeck forgot to put the aircraft in burner. He lined it up, put it 100%, and released the brakes, and then just kind of nothing happened. So the instructor says, well, aren't you going to go to afterburner? And then, oh yeah. So he does. Well, okay. Yeah, you can easily see that. You can have it's first time, you get a mistake like that. Well, second takeoff, forgets to put in afterburner. Third takeoff, he's got a consistent roll going here. Third takeoff, he forgets. Fourth takeoff. Fifth takeoff, he forgets to put it in afterburner. The instructor, Lieutenant Flail, again, would come back. He would slam his checklist, and these had these metal little checklist holders there for the approach place. He would slam that down on the table, almost hitting me a couple of times. Oh, God, he was just angry as could be. He would come in shaking his head, and Lieutenant Norbeck would come in just sauntering, happy as could be, not knowing anything was wrong. Well, one day they take off, and we had this 210-degree radial that we intercepted outbound to go to the practice areas. And Lieutenant Norbeck saw that he was off the radial, so he puts in a 30-degree banked intercept. Well, he kind of gets distracted, I guess. I'm not quite sure what happens, but the turn keeps going, and then he sees he's about to intercept the 210-degree radial, so he rolls out, tracks it. Hey, it's going great. Of course, center by this time is going like, what the heck are you doing? And Of course, the Lieutenant Flanagan came back in from this flight, and there's the depiction of the aircraft in the nice little bank going around to intercept. And Lieutenant Flanagan came in, and he just was shaking his head, and he says, "Lieutenant Norbeck, do you remember when you intercepted the 210-degree radial inbound?" And Lieutenant Norbeck kind of goes, no, I don't. And he says, Lieutenant Flanagan says, "Do you remember when I said I've got it?" And, well, he wasn't happy. Well, the story continues. We were at the phase in the syllabus where we're doing unusual attitude recoveries. The instructor would put the airplane in a high-speed dive facing down. You're looking at a lot of dirt in the windshield, and he would kind of distract you. He said, "I'm going to fly it for a little bit," and he'd fly it, and then he'd kind of distract you, and you'd put in this situation, and he'd say, "Recover." And so you had to get on the controls, and you had to pull the power to idle, drop the speed brakes, and load it up with G to pull out and avoid hitting the nice Oklahoma dirt. We were out at Enid, Oklahoma. Well, now let's talk about the T-38 cockpit. You see on the left-hand side, front cockpit, there are the throttles. Now, the right side of the picture, you got the throttles, you got the finger lifts, the microphone button, the speed brake, the throttles. Okay? Well, very nice. Well, what you do with the finger lifts is when you're ready to shut down the engines and you're at idle in the chocks, parked. See, parked is the key thing, on the ground, parked. You lift the finger lifts and you pull the engines to cutoff, and that shuts down the engines. That's the time you're supposed to do it unless you've got something like a fire or something, where you might otherwise want to shut them down. Well, Lieutenant Norbeck grabbed the throttles with his hand, and in grabbing it, he did kind of a meat fist grab where he put the fingers over the finger lifts. So as he pulled back, he lifted both finger lifts. I think you can see where this is going. He lifted both finger lifts and pulled both engines into cutoff. All right, we've got a dual engine flameout. Of course, Lieutenant Flanagan isn't quite sure what happened in the back seat there, but he just lost both engines. Well, he is not a happy camper, to say the least. Okay, well, it's my turn to go flying here, and the bad thing was he tended to fly with Lieutenant Norbeck in the morning, and then he'd fly with me a little bit later, and he was in a bad mood. Of course, he was in a perpetual bad mood because he was a fighter pilot, and he didn't get his fighter, and he was something he didn't want to do, and all this stuff, and he let you know it. So now he's already kind of wired up, and he's flying with me. Well, we go up and we're gonna do some stalls in the 38, some aft stick idle stalls, and the T-38 it's not like your Cessna 172. You don't approach the stall and get a break and hey, we're in the stall now. It's as you get slow, you start to get buffet off the airfoil, separating off the swept wing. It's a symmetrical airfoil, so the airflow tends to separate easier than it does with a normal cambered airfoil. So you get this separation. In the pattern, you're always in a little bit of buffet. The indication you're in a stall, other than the AOA, which goes deep red, is that the buffet increases and the bottom just kind of drops out of the airplane. And you are really falling out of the sky. And he's demonstrating this, and I'm up in the front, and I'm watching it, and we're getting an increased buffet. I mean, it's like somebody's hitting the airplane with sledgehammers, and we're just going down, and that's very interesting. But we start this wing rocking, and we're literally going 90 degrees to the left and to the right, and to the left and to the right, and it's a pretty severe wing rocking. And I noticed the stick comes full forward, and I've noticed it's sitting there for a while, and we're still doing this wing rocking thing, and the stick had been forward for a while. It's kind of interesting, and then the airplane comes out of it. And he says, "Oh my gosh, I was just about to say bail out." And I go, "What?" He says, "Yeah, didn't you see how long the stick was forward?" And I go, "Well, yeah, I wasn't used to doing stalls in this, so I didn't have any idea." And he says, "I almost called for bail. I didn't think it was going to recover." Well, that was kind of interesting. That kind of set him up to be not in a good mood already. Now it's my turn to do the high-speed dive recovery. Of course, I mean, this is early in the syllabus. I'm just, you can't fly a 600 knot airplane at the time I probably was up to a 400 knot brain, but I mean, you're really, you're really struggling to stay up. And I quickly, he said, I've got the aircraft. So I figured he wants to just have some fun, fly a little bit. So fine. So I look down, I get my map, I want to make sure I'm staying within the confines of, we were in tube one or whatever. I want to make sure I'm, staying in the boundaries there. And then all of a sudden I hear recover. And oh my gosh, I see the dirt below me. I grab the throttles. Now I didn't get the finger lifts. That was a good thing there. But I pull them back to idle, and I load in on the G. Well, I wasn't used to pulling a lot of G in the T-38. I hadn't really had a lot of experience with it, and I had not pulled G at high speed. Well, I over G'd the aircraft. Well, he was not happy about that, naturally, because we had to ride it up, and the bad mood he was in, that made it kind of worse. So we come back in and land, and it was very quiet, and he was upset. And the training went on like this, and he was just extremely unpleasant to fly with. And so I finally requested an instructor change. And the explained to the flight commander what was going on. Flight commander brought him in, had kind of a heart-to-heart with him, and he comes back, and he tried to be a little bit better, but he really wasn't. But the flight commander told him he needed to shape up, and this just wasn't the way to be an instructor. Well, I got through the 38 program. I could have probably done better if I wasn't fighting my instructor half the time, but I did. I got through, and I did all right. And I enjoyed the airplane immensely, and I enjoyed flying it out at Edwards at the Flight Test Center as a chase pilot too. T-38 is one of my favorite aircraft. That's why my Corvette license plate is T-38. So, what happened to Lieutenant Flail again? Did he get his fighter? Was he rewarded? Did he get what he wanted finally after he served his tour? Well, karma can be one of those female dog sort of things. I don't think this was the helicopter he got, but he got a helicopter. So, he's probably looking back thinking, that 38 was actually pretty nice because he didn't get his fighter. And once he got locked into helicopters, that's probably where he spent the rest of his career. I had no idea. I didn't look him up. I didn't care to look him up. I had no interest in what ever happened to Lieutenant Flail again, and I never heard anything about him. Anyway, that's my fun T-38 instructor who doesn't want to be an instructor. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.